Hey there, welcome. We are on a lovely Saturday morning inside the Radiantly Alive Woman. It's nice and early. I've just had my morning tea and shower in this beautiful Costa Rican jungle landscape. So thank you for joining me here today. We are going to learn about tailbone scars. We're going to understand what that actually means. Like, do I have a scar on my tailbone or not? So first we're going to get an idea of how that could happen, what it actually means, and then really like the concepts around the scarring, scar tissue, and just fibrotic kind of tissue in general. And then we're going to go into the three concepts that we always talk about. It helps us to really understand the scar in great detail when we touch on these three. The first one is the physical considerations that you need to be considering. Sorry, there's this wild bug around. There's lots of like crazy jungle bugs here. The first one that you need to be considering is the physical considerations. It's very grounding to understand the physical body. It's very easy, or it's easier because it's right in front of you, and we're kind of always thinking about or working with our body in some way. And then the second thing we're going to talk about is the energy and the emotion, all the considerations that you need to think about when you have a scar down in that area of your body. Tailbone is kind of like the root, the kind of base of our body, but also of our energy body. So we're going to talk about that. And then the third thing that we're going to do, as we always do, is the what to do. So you're going to get all the information, and then over time, throughout this video, I'm going to give you something in particular on how you can actually start working that scar. This is a very important piece. We're getting a lot of information these days. We're like absorbing all the things, but then we don't necessarily have a good application, or we don't really know how to move forward with that information, which is kind of unfortunate because this keeps us actually stuck and in place. It gets our mind pumping, but we don't have any forward action. So in all of these videos, I give you what to do for all scars and then what to do with this particular scar. In this case, we're talking about tailbone scars. So let's get into the first part that I was talking about. Let's talk about what a tailbone scar actually is. Like, do I have one? Do I not? So I grew up in a very cold country where it was very common to just slip on your butt. You know, those like banana peel slips where you fall and really hit hard. If you grew up in a country that was icy or cold or slippery or wet, maybe you have fallen on your tailbone at least once or twice. I know that I have. Or maybe you've played winter sports, like any kind of sport where you could really bang your tailbone hard on ice or snow or just the hard ground, anything like that. You want to consider, do you have a tailbone scar or not? And we're going to talk about this as a concept for the tailbone, but I want you to think about it in all areas because this actually is true and accurate for all areas of the body. So when you have an injury, I get that guy one time. It's totally harmless. Yesterday, just like off topic, we got home from a friend's house to just spend a little bit of time with them after dinner, and there's a scorpion just like walking through our second floor, like awake and well and just trotting through our living room. It was a bit shocking, so we got him out and back into nature quickly. It's very welcome to the jungle. Okay, so let's talk about like this idea of how you can hurt yourself and how it could potentially move into a scar. If you've ever seen a massage therapist regularly or a chiropractor, even an osteopath, a lot of the time they'll talk about adhesions and scar tissue being like scarring in the area. And so this is the concept that I want to highlight and talk about and how it could be potentially different to scarring that we have when we have an accident or a surgery, when there's like an incision, more common thing that we think about when we're thinking about scars. So over time, as something is healing, it requires a certain amount of nourishment, nutrients, all the stuff that goes there, which happens when the inflammation kind of cascade is happening, that swelling inflammation cycle that happens acutely when you hurt yourself. It's bringing all the goods. Now, if something hurts a lot, we avoid it. You know, if you roll your ankle, you avoid going on that ankle. This is very normal. It's a normal thing that we have innate in our human nature that we avoid stuff that hurts. We avoid pain. Now, if we really take this on as an idea, then we start changing the way that we move. So we start changing the way that we walk. In this particular example, we'll change the step, like the pacing at which maybe we like go over that right foot like really quickly. So we have a different kind of cadence or different kind of movement pattern that creates compensation. Now, in my world, compensation is not necessarily a bad thing. Compensation is the thing that gets you up and out of bed and doing stuff all day, which is great. If we didn't have compensation patterns, if our neurology wasn't that intelligent, if our body wasn't able to make those changes really quick, those adjustments, we'd be in big trouble. So compensation is a good thing, but we want to consider at what cost and how can we actually start to work those compensations over time. So if we spend a period of time, weeks, months, years, not leaning into something, we not only have changed the way that we walk, we change how everything else functions, the way that the bones articulate against each other, the way that those muscles contract and relax, how all the fluid systems, the neurology, everything is kind of moving and interacting. It will all be affected, not necessarily in a massive way, but if you have like multiple dozens, hundreds of different compensations, which of course we as humans have, because we all have injuries, we all have history, we all have stuff going on, then it can start to break down over time. Now, when we really don't put a lot of emphasis in somewhere, when we don't put input into anything, I talk about this a lot. If there's no input somewhere, the first thing that happens is we kind of like lose it from our awareness. We find it really hard to connect to. Because when we don't breathe into something, move something, flex something, think about something, it just becomes a lost thought. We don't think about it. It becomes like a black void hole in our awareness. This is true. I can't remember which video I was talking about it in, but just recently I was talking about the research experiment that happened when you have 5 fingers, obviously. In this research experiment, they glued or they taped 2 together for a period of time, like for weeks. So instead of doing all that awesome stuff with 5 fingers, they had 4. And so the body quickly had to adapt. The body had to bring on multiple different compensation patterns to make, doing your hair, doing your clothes, doing your computer work, cooking, eating, all that stuff workable, which it does very quickly and easily. But actually what happened in the neurology in the brain is it totally grayed over the area where it had 5 fingers mapped. It started to only think that you had 4. So not only is it like an awareness thing, but like quite literally your neurology will change. And that makes it even harder to feel. That makes it influences it even more to not put input. So like goes to like, you're not going to put even more input into it. There's going to be no input because you don't even know it's there. Okay, so over time, what happens is things get dense, things get fibrotic, meaning like areas get thicker and areas get dehydrated. And when this happens, there's not really that good information or that good lubrication or any kind of stuff going into the area physically, but also emotionally and energetically, we're not putting input in the area. And the same thing goes when we want to like get stuff out, like toxins, debris, stuff that's hanging around there, stuckness, stagnation, that's not actually evacuating. That's not happening because there's no input. So over time, these things can lead to fibrotic like tissue that is very unmovable. It's very not pliable. It doesn't modify to what we're doing very well. And that over time will create adhesions, which is also a way of thinking about scar tissue. Scar tissue that you have from an incision or a surgery, like I'm talking thyroids, breast surgeries, C-section, abdominal, all the stuff that we've been speaking about for months and months and months. This has a slightly different flavor, but the idea underneath it is the same. If we don't put input into an area, it will calcify, it will harden, it will fibrotically kind of become dehydrated, whatever words you want to use, it's all the same thing. So on the flip of that, it's not like it's forever. All you need to start to do is start to put input into the area. Just as quickly as the body can go from 5 fingers to 4, the body can start to change and take that influence and start to make some sort of adaptability. Like the fibrotic adhesion will start to become more movable. It will start to, as muscles in the area contract, it'll start to pull and push, like pulse in, pulse out, all the fluid, because that's one of the functions of muscle. It helps the fluid system get in and out, bring stuff to, take stuff out. That will start to make the muscles more supple. That will get stuff in and out of the area. And then that fibrotic kind of scar that you may have on your tailbone or anywhere will start to function in a way that's completely different. You're getting input in the area, it starts to be adaptable, it starts to change, and then it goes back to like normal function. So in this circumstance, when I say normal function, the tailbone is at the very bottom of your sacrum, which is like this upside down triangle like bone at the back of your pelvis. Your pelvis is three bones. It's like this massive sweeping hip bone on the right, also called the ilium. The exact same thing that's going on the left. They join in the front with this like squishy kind of filling. It's like an Oreo sandwich, like the Oreo filling in the middle. There's like this fibrotic kind of capsule, this disc that's in between that joins in the front that we call our pubic bone. And then at the back, we have these SI joints that join the iliums, the back of the pelvis, to the sacrum. Go down the sacrum and you find this like other smaller, like teeny tinier triangle, upside down triangle. Now, this whole thing should be sitting balanced, meaning it's not shifted to the left or the right or rotated or, any kind of like movement off kilter that stays for a long time will put everything else off balance, either in a big way or a small way, depending on how much it is. So when I say that the tissue can return back to function, when we have a tailbone injury, when we slip and fall on our butt, or we bang it really hard on whatever else, it can also happen from giving birth. I've had lots of women who've had this happen when they're giving birth. The baby can hit the tailbone on the way out, and I've had a woman break her tailbone from giving birth, which is pretty intense, pretty significant. Can happen from all of these different things. Maybe not even like directly. Maybe you got into a car accident and you damaged your face and neck and shoulders, but the way that you came in and back, you slammed down on your tailbone and hurt it. That will challenge all that connective tissue that's at the bottom, that's like hooked up into your tailbone, as well as hooked up into the rest of your pelvic floor. So your tailbone is intricately, like directly linked to your pelvic floor. It's all the same tissue. It's more of a denser like tissue. It's tendinous. It can be like fibrotic and dense if it's stuck, and it's all plugged into the muscles that kind of line our pelvic floor from our pubic bone all the way to our kind of tailbone area. That's all pelvic floor, which should be a mix of muscle that's supple, as well as tendon and ligament that's all kind of creating this shape. So when you bang it, it gets stuck like that. We don't put input in there. We kind of forget about it and we don't move it, and we don't even know that it's maybe stuck or jammed. That area has an influence where part of it will be jammed and compressed. So all the tissue will be short and like bunchy and compressed. And then on the other side of the tailbone, it'll be like really stretched and taut and long because it's off of its center. It got like jammed over here, super bunchy, and then really stretched and pulled. So this kind of alignment or like misalignment can create all sorts of things that we're going to talk about right now. So I hope that helps you understand like what I'm talking about when I say tailbone scar. Hopefully that was easy to understand and not too crazy. But that's how I really want you to think about the tailbone scar, as well as any other scarring that you may have in your body. It's really common for people to like say that they have fibrotic like adhesions in their kind of shoulder blade area, or like in the back or in the neck, because they don't move those areas very well. Maybe it's from a car accident or whatever. That's another area you can think about as having that kind of fibrotic like tissue. All right, let's go into the physical. The physical considerations. Now that we have all that background, let's talk about how that tissue of the pelvic floor is hooked up to the rest of the body. So as a clinical therapist, I think really quickly, when someone's talking about tailbone, I instantly think about their pelvic floor, their bladder and bowel function. I start thinking about the stability that they have in their spine, as well as their breathing. That goes right up into their jaw and TMJ kind of area. All of that is connected. All of that is one sweep of tissue. And a way to really look at this, if you want to just get geeky with me for a moment, I know some of you really like getting as geeky as I do. So you're going to look up, get your Google fingers going. You're going to look up Thomas Myers Anatomy Trains and look at the deep front line. The deep front line will show you all of this tissue in a blue kind of sweep. Really from this sweep of tissue is like the deepest part of your body. It's the closest to your core, like the center of everything. You'll see it sweeping through the legs, as well as all like the deep hip muscles and pelvic floor, and it will start coming up here and it ends in the jaw area. So think about physical considerations. If you have a tailbone, something or other going on, think about your clenching. Think about pain with eating. Think about grinding when you're sleeping. Forward head posture. If you feel like you have bad posture in your neck and you're holding it forward, this is really common. Breathing problems create a whirlwind of issues, including back pain, because the diaphragm is such a large muscle that like spans the inner part. It splits your torso from like rib cage to soft belly, and it should be moving with your breathing. And when it doesn't, or when it's restricted for long periods of time, it challenges your respiratory system, your cardiovascular system. It's highly linked to having if you have breathing problems, you'll have cardiovascular disease, or you're more likely to have it, respiratory problems, heart stuff going on. And here, what I want you to think about is it creates a vulnerability in the back, in the low back in particular. So think about that when you're thinking about your tailbone scar. And the bladder bowel function, just briefly, if the way that your tailbone is not resting well, it creates, like I said, this kind of misalignment of tension. So there'll be like tautness and compression, and that challenges the rest of the body to sit in a proper way. So I often talk about the slide and glide mechanism. I talk about this in my course, Scars Matter, where everything needs a certain amount of wiggle room to move. There's not a lot of extra space. So when there's misalignment, stuff goes off, the organs just kind of get into their non-ideal place. So we talk about this a lot in like reproductive challenges. We'll talk about like uteruses that are rotated in certain directions, or cervixes that are rotated in certain directions. This can be because of what's going on in your pelvic floor, what's going on in your tailbone, like how are you breathing? All of this stuff can like start to play a part. There can be like this interesting like spiral effect. So when we get those types of diagnoses, we want to actually look at our history. We want to like look at what's going on. We want to think of why. Why is this happening? Because when you get your answer, you have your solution. So bladder and bowel function, if it's not resting very comfortably in like the way that it should, you may experience stuff like urgency, incontinence, slow bowels, fast bowels, all of these different types of things can happen. All of that can go down in this general area because everything's so closely linked and intricate. There's not a lot of room for everything. If there's something that's sitting in the wrong way, then everything else gets bunched and kind of pulled around. So I think that that's all I want to say about the physical. And maybe I'll just briefly touch on the obvious here. Your tailbone is plugged into, connected to your sacrum. Now, on top of your sacrum starts your low back, your L5, the final segment of your lumbar spine. And then obviously, so you got a whole spine on top of that. So you can quickly make tailbone issues up into neck stuff, because if that area is not working well or not moving well, that's going to have a knock-on effect to the rest of the body, and you can feel it all the way into like the base of your skull. So tension, headaches, dizziness, trouble seeing, meaning like lightheadedness, or like easily fatigued, brain fog, really good and common. All of that is connected. All right, let's go into the energetic and emotional considerations. So now that we've kind of understood the physical body, we kind of get it, we understand those connections are probably easier to see. Now I want you to think about your own story, like what happened to your tailbone. That really helps bring this whole section to light. So you can actually consider yourself and what I'm saying, because this stuff can feel more abstract or a little bit harder to reach in your own mind and thinking. So the energetic and emotional considerations are talking about the energy in your body as well as the kind of emotion around the event. Not necessarily like just the incident, like not just the slip or the accident or whatever happened, giving birth. It could be stuff before or after, which I'll talk about in a moment, our little 3-part like roadmap for understanding these principles more clearly. But first, most importantly, that I want to talk about, if you got a tailbone injury, that's the base of your body. That's what you sit on all day, and we're doing a lot of sitting. So you may be already sitting a little bit off kilter, which may put all of these different like challenges on your energy body. It's not flowing very well. could also create all these different physical compensations. But if we have an injury at the real base, at the real root of our body, so we have in yoga and Ayurveda, we have a chakra there. It's at the very base, the bottom of our pelvic floor. It's called the root chakra. If you've seen a diagram, sometimes you see it in red. That's really our seat. That's really the starting point at which we kind of move from. So if that's obstructed, bogged down, clogged, not moving well, you're going to feel that in your body. You may feel a sense of like ungroundedness, so off center, challenge to bring yourself to stabilization, meaning like to alignment, to feeling like you're in control, you're present, you're aware. That may be really often hard for you. If the tailbone is like leaning off into one direction, which it most commonly is, sometimes it's like rotated left or right, but if it's leaning too far into one side of your body, you may have a problem with balance. Like you may have a problem just in your energy of feeling that balance or that connection between this and that, really learning how to bring balance into your life. Now, another added thing as a woman that really is like your powerhouse. That's like the seat of who you are as a woman. Not only like physically are we talking about all the like reproductive organs and our like sexual organs, but really this is the seat of our femininity. This is where we can really connect with who we are as women. There's a lot of reason for which we have disconnected from this area. It could be because of, painful or irregular menstrual cycles. It could be because of trauma in the area, physical, emotional, sexual, abusive kind of trauma. But we need to come back and connect with this area. It's so crucial. When I work with women, this is like one of the main pillars that we work on. We need to reconnect with our body because when we can get that, one of the functions of that area is to help us like build and pull energy in so that we can use it to transform and work on ourselves. If we are like pulled out and drained and like stretched in all these different directions and we're really just like kind of leaking energy everywhere, we have too much on our plate or we're over serving or we're doing too much or we're not listening to our needs and we're putting ourselves last or whatever version of that, what happens is you have a really hard time actually holding your own energy. And if you're not able to do that, if you're not able to contain that kind of earthy like element quality, then you're kind of always at a loss. And then you put like a kind of a wild mind on top of that, plus poor sleep, maybe not the best diet, and then we have a big problem. We're having a real problem actually even starting the process of transformation. So it's so crucial that you get on board with this idea that we need to come back into there in all of the different ways. And the way that I teach, there's all of these different methods that we can think about to really reconnect with that area and bring it back to life. It's really not that enlivened in most women. So we need that thumping. We need that to feel like it's alive and awake. I think that's all I want to talk about the energy and the motion. Now let's do the what to do. I'm just going to briefly touch on what I want to talk about or what I teach for every single scar. It's really important that you do this for every single scar. So now that you've heard me speak and you're considering like, oh yeah, I think I do have a scar there. That is some of the things that I've been feeling. That makes sense. I'm resonating. Now you have to go and do this first step. It's a 3-part guided practice. And the first part is relaxing into. The relaxing into is 4 simple steps. You got to find somewhere comfortable to spend a bit of time there. Bedroom, living room, whatever. You got to sit or lay down, or however you're comfortable again. Whatever that means, get comfortable. Skin to skin contact. You want to actually make contact with the scar. So however this plays out for you, so it's probably most easily in the tailbone to actually like sit and like hold the pelvic floor, or if you have like good shoulder mobility, you can kind of lie on your arm and feel that connection. It's best if it's skin to skin so that you can activate and really wake up the sense of touch, meaningfully make contact with your body in a way that says like, I am now beginning and now I'm committing to getting a little bit of information about this area, an area that I may have disconnected from or neglected or been a little bit afraid to go into. Now I'm saying, yes, this is what's happening. I'm making contact. The 4th thing you're going to do is close your eyes. Tone down the sense of sight, of vision, ramp up the sense of touch, helps you to stay kind of like contained and comfortable and maybe feeling a little bit more than you would if your eyes are kind of up and awake and moving. Okay, second phase, physical considerations. Gather as much physical information as you can. Some people, when you actually start touching the tailbone, it's super sensitive. And that's a good piece of information right there. It's not like every day we're sitting on our tailbone or feeling our tailbone. So really spend a bit of time there. Some people feel like when I go on a long airplane flight, it really hurts. But that means it's always sensitive. It's just like that much pressure is irritating it by a certain point. So you want to really attune yourself to the subtleties of these kind of physical considerations. Think about temperature, hot and cold. Think about just the sense of hypersensitivity or numbness. Very common for it to be numb. Feel into how it makes you feel. Like, do you have an aversion? Do you feel sick? People who've had big, like, banging injuries or like really traumatic like things will commonly have a sense of feeling like an upset stomach or nauseous or some sort of aversion, feel icky. All of these things are really common to feel. And then you want to feel particularly in this area, and you may need to do this a few times because the more you really like engage the sense of touch, the more you'll feel this stuff. But you want to feel on either side of your tailbone where there's like a lot of tautness or a lot of ropiness, a lot of tension, feeling like there's a lot of stuckness or something. Like really feel that area. You can also obviously feel the bone. Differentiate like there's a bone and that's not, so that you can feel all of that. You want to do that on both sides, on the left side of the tailbone as well as the right side. So you can compare. Feeling into all of those things. Is there any kind of like pulling? Can you feel it drag? Do you feel it off center? As many of those things as you can grab, the better. Now, if you go into the emotional and energetic that we're talking about, I'll give you the little blueprint that I say to everyone. It really helps just get you in line with what you're doing. You want to think about the energy, the energetic kind of like signature, the feeling, the inner dialogue, the thought patterns, all of these things that are going on in three distinct phases so that you're really able to hone in on like what's going on. So think about yourself in this story. Think about what happened. Think about it before. So before the actual incident, what was going on? This could be a very different scenario if it was an accident versus if it was giving birth. So with birth, most women, especially if it's their first time, are afraid because there's an uncertainty. There's a huge unknown there. How do I do this? How does it all work out? If there's an accident, if it's just a slip and a fall, there's probably not a lot there. But still, investigate, feel into it. What were how was your life then? What were you thinking in your mind? Your inner dialogue? Were you stressed? Were you busy? What were your finances like? All of these things, relationship dynamics. It's just good to think about because that may be unlocked as you start to work the scar, as you start to really bring that area back to its full kind of state and capacity. So that's the first one. Then the second one is during the accident itself, during the surgery, during the whatever it was, birthing. Think about all of that just in the incident. It may have been a split second, it may have been longer. Think about all of the kind of feeling that you felt, the surprise, the pain, how you kind of felt into that if you're giving birth, all of those things. Feel it. And then the final one is after. The after one for this is probably the most significant one because you want to really think about how you moved or how you changed, like your movement patterns. Were you sitting on one of those donuts for a period of time? Were you like unable to sit on your tailbone for a week or 10 days? Did you avoid doing something? Can you no longer sit comfortably? All of these things, like what you can and can't do, as well as the energy and emotion behind that. Like now that you can't do that, or now that you feel hindered in some way, or whatever it is, feel, gather, get that info. So that's the three-part guided practice. Now, what to do with the tailbone scar specifically? So this is a very detailed exercise. I give this to people very often. There's a lot of like subtle little tweaks, but you can feel into this yourself. It's really easy to do. What you're going to do is you're going to essentially do like a cat-cow movement, but laying down on the ground on your back. Okay, so like a traditional cat-cow as we know it from yoga is we're doing this big extension. I call it, or therapists will call it, triple extension and triple flexion, meaning your neck flexes, your thoracic spine flexes, your lumbar back flexes. The whole spine does this, which is an extension, And then the whole spine does that, which is a flexion. Now, because you're laying on the ground, your head can't do that. There's a certain kind of alignment that needs to happen between the skull, the rib cage, and the pelvis. It's like laying on the ground. So you can't move your head so crazily, which is exactly what we want. There's actually a good reason for this, which I can't go into this video now because I don't want to make it wildly long. But what you're going to do is you're going to focus on the cat-cow-like movement from your pelvis. And what I want you to do is I want you to, when you get down on the ground, I want you to feel like you begin with, this is the ground, with your pelvis level and flat. Sometimes we're like rolled off to one side, or like we're like really leaning in a particular direction. So you want to lay as flat as you can, and you want to put a kind of medium like pressure through your sacrum the whole time you do the movement. Like as you're doing your cat-cow, you want to feel like, I imagine, you know, like a roller brush when you're painting your house. Imagine like you're painting your sacrum along the ground from the very top of your sacrum all the way down to your tailbone. Okay, so you're keeping that pressure and starting to smooth through that. And once you get all that tissue, all like the fibrotic, dense, like erector spinae muscles that are in that area to kind of soften from that, it will start to open up what's potentially holding that misalignment at the tailbone. Now, the other thing that helps to really like bring this into its fullest expression is to breathe low into your pelvic floor. Again, that's another very detailed kind of explanation, but just as you're doing the movement, so as you do an extension, ideally, as you do an anterior tilt of your pelvis, if you know what that is, as you kind of roll towards your tailbone, roll forward as far as you can onto your tailbone, that's done on an inhale. Now, as you pull back, that's done on the exhale. So you're really keeping that pressure, moving the pelvis, using the ground as a really important tool, helps you to feel that solid contact and helps you to start realigning the tailbone. So that is my what to do. That's what I have for you today. If you have any questions about any of that, if you have some questions now, please feel free to type it out. If you're watching this on a replay, you're very welcome to just type it out. And then if you've tried it and you have a question, please just come back onto this thread and ask me a question. I'm very active in here. I see it all, and I'm very happy to help. So thank you so much for being here. We have 3 more lives coming up next week. And then, like I said, we're switching topics come mid-October. It's really exciting, and I can't wait to share with you what that is and what's coming. But for now, we'll continue on with these series, and I hope that you have a great weekend, and I will see you soon. Bye.